So welcome back. We're going to talk about the examiner comments that are relating to Spaniel question. So here, as you said, Spaniel is a June 2013 question. So we're going to explore briefly on examiner comments so that we can be able to learn from the mistakes of others who've done it before. So like in the first part here, we're talking about discuss why auditors should presume that there are risks of fraud in revenue recognition and why ISA 240 requires specific auditor response in relation to the risk identified. So in this session, we're talking about how it was more of like focusing on the fraud and also why revenue is considered a high risk area for fraud. And as you can see in this question from the June 2013 candidates who sat for it, it was noted that it was poorly answered because most candidates set out lengthy explanations of the respective duties of the auditor and management for the identification and prevention of fraud, and they were not answering the question. So they, like we said, you should just be very specific, direct to the point, no beating around the bush. So write you write why it's considered a high risk area, and you talk about maybe the first point you say, uh, if it's a cash intensive business, then there will be high risk of fraud because the management can easily steal, and they can also make fictitious claims and make fictitious figures for revenue. So that might pose a threat that is maybe deemed as fraud. So don't go beating around the bush and talk about things and all that. So you just have to be straight to the point and explain your why, explain your why as to why that is done. So why do you think being in a cash intensive business might pose a high risk of fraud when it comes to revenue? So you should explain that instead of being all lengthy. So the second, that's the first part, which is part A. So let's move to part B, what the examiner's comment was. So in this question, we're talking about like matters that needs to be considered in determining whether grooming company is liable to Spaniel company in respect of fraud. So this was more of like professional ability, trying to see if whether there was a case here for Spaniel, like is there like any evidence of negligence that was being performed. So it was basically talking about professional liability, in which the examiner said that requirement B um, was that this question, like they said, was some of them they had the best points, which clear the best points were that they determined the negligence. Like I said, like there has to be a uh, there has to be a duty of care, and there has to be like a breach of duty of care, and then financial loss suffered. So as we've said, like the best answers that were given were able to determine negligence and apply them methodically to the scenario. So you see, like your best answer is actually to apply what you know to the scenario. So, and they said like others did not, the ones that had weaker answers, they only provided rote learned description of responsibility in relation to fraud and usually failed to reach an appropriate conclusion. So this means like they were just explaining what auditors' responsibilities are and all that, which was not particularly needed in this situation. They had to just to show that it was management, that it's the primary responsibility of management to prevent and detect fraud. Um, and what the auditors does, what the auditor does is to provide to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement, whether caused by fraud or error. And in this situation, we can see that we were going deeper into the question about sorry that I was there about the negligence situation that was happening there. So you should not do knowledge dumping. Don't dump your knowledge into the question. You should just apply what you actually know about that professional ability into this question specifically. So, like we said, explain those matters that should be considered in determining whether it is liable. Is those the ones that we were talking about. And then we should go to the last part, which was talking right, bulldog, and whereby we're talking about like the why financial influencer is challenging to audit and the planning that what needs to be considered in planning. So in this situation, the examiner comments that answers were extremely mixed in quality. So satisfactory answers focused on why the satisfactory ones, they focused on why financial instruments generally are difficult to audit, discussed their complex nature, the changing landscape of financial reporting requirements for both the client and auditor. Um, and in this situation, when the adequate answers focused on simple matters such as managing resources, obtaining the nature of the contracts and controls in relation to them, and assessing how management values the financial instruments. So those who had provided weaker answers, they didn't include much reference to audit at all, and simply listed out financial reporting rules with no consideration of audit implications other than saying that financial instruments are complex and subjective. So here, the weaker answers did not give any reference to any ISA components, which in this situation we see like here they were talking about auditing estimates. So that you could have just put that down there. But if that is if that you know that it is actually the one. If you guess, then I think you will be penalized and you won't get any mark at all. So that is what were the examiner comments on this particular question for Spaniel Company, June 2013. So thank you so much for going through these questions with me and also like through the examiner comments review. So see you later. Stay safe.